It was a wildfire all over the world. IDF are rapists, and now you don't need to be a Candace Owens to believe that. This is the worst anti-Semitic smear of the war, and it was generated by our own army.
The investigation is going on by whom?
Nobody investigates this leak. We went bankrupt because of this lie, and they've ruined our lives. And if they think they will bury the Sde Teiman affair, they are mistaken. It will not happen.
Gadi?
Long time no see, Pamela.
I know, it's nice to see you.
Although you're in Israel a lot.
I have been coming to Israel quite a bit. And speaking of Israel, tell me about what's going on with you and your some kind of court case, civil suit, something happening.
Oh, the Ronen Bergman affair?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's a prominent journalist. He works for the New York Times too. And what he does is, since there are censorship laws in Israel, he publishes sensitive information, allegedly, I should say, now that I'm in court, in the New York Times, and then it appears on the site where he works in Israel, sometimes 9 minutes after. Because the censorship laws here, you can quote anything from the foreign press. Mm-hmm. So, Israelis to this day say, we don't know if we have nuclear weapons, but according to the foreign press, we do. The alleged suspicion is that he launders the information through the New York Times. And then he also publishes a lot of very damaging leaks. And these leaks are from the Matkal, from the commanding forum of the army, which is, I guess, the Joint Chiefs, something like that. Only we don't have separate services, so these are the high-ranking generals. And they are still trapped in the Oslo frame of mind, and they were lackeys to the Biden administration and shared Biden's ambition to stop the war. I don't know if she said Biden's ambition, because when the Biden administration started, some senior political aide to a high-ranking official in America told me, strictly speaking, there's no such thing as Joe Biden. And that was the beginning of Biden's term. So we're assuming other people are running the show.
Somebody told you that at the beginning of his term?
Yeah, absolutely. And we all thought he was a walking zombie. And what the Biden administration shared with these left-leaning generals in Israel is that the desire to stop the war before Israel occupies Gaza. And so they tried to prevent any escalation of the war. They wanted to stop it before Rafah. You remember Rafah? Biden threatened to stop giving us munition. He was already embargoing us, but clandestinely. Now he declared it. His vice president, a woman named Pamela, I don't know if you remember, she said that I studied the maps. There's nowhere for these people to go. And all this pressure was to stop us before Rafah. Imagine that. If we had stopped before Rafah, Israel's blood would have been in the water. Yahya Sinwar would have been the new Saladin. And Nasrallah would have been perched on our border with 150,000 missiles. Assad would have been in Syria, and Iran would be weeks from a bomb. And so, luckily, these people didn't have our way, but they did try to sabotage the war, assuming they're saving Israel from itself. So my fight with Ronen Bergman began when I referred to one of his leaks. 16 hours before the beeper operation, he published something in Ynet, which is very central here, that says the high-ranking officials in the security apparatus are worried that Israel is going to do something rash, which will embroil it in a regional war. And that looked like an attempt to stop. In retrospect, it looked like an attempt to stop the beeper operation.
And this was citing his own piece in the New York Times?
No, he published as a leak from a high-ranking official in the security apparatus. I wrote this leak was intended to stop the operation. And he is claiming that it wasn't about the beepers and that his intention was certainly not to do anything about the beepers. But still, objectively, it could have foiled the whole beeper operation because you alert the enemy that something is afoot. And as we now know, they were already beginning to suspect stuff. So he's suing me about that. He threatened many other people, and he's suing many other people.
Defamation, yeah?
Defamation, yeah. And this is an attempt to shut people up. I know some people just surrendered, paid the minimal fee that he asked, and said, sorry, I won't publish that again. My reaction was the diametric opposite. If you intend to shut criticism, I dedicated 50 minutes on my podcast to what I called the Ronen Bergman system. So if the intention was to shut me up, it did not succeed.
So what's the system?
The system is what I described to you, that he allegedly, he launders sensitive information.
Now, so let me make sure I have this.
Just for the legal case, right. I must say, not just allegedly, but it could be claimed, or he could claim, that this has been cleared by censorship somehow. I've asked him on Twitter. If that's the case, he refuses to answer.
Okay, so I just want, for people that don't know about the military censors here, the government censors, because like the word censor is unheard of in the U.S., right? We don't have these kinds of laws. But because you have...
you have tremendous censorship of speech.
We do, but not
officially.
But not officially, right. And you have some official censorship through the government press office, right?
You can lose your job for quoting a sentence with the N-word that someone else said. So we count that as...
that's not a government censor.
It's not a government censorship.
So here, there are certain sensitive matters sensitive to the military that the government needs to approve before people can write in or put out in the press, right?
I don't know if you saw, we were standing together when someone from the government press agency, I asked him about getting a press card. I'm a podcaster, so I never bothered.
Right.
And he said, yeah, you'll have to fill the forms. And one of the forms is that you commit to following censorship guidelines. Because, listen, you have tremendous censorship in times of war. We are always in a time of war.
I have this press card. Yes, it's the GPO, the Government Press Office card. And so I know what that has said, which is the first time that I heard about censorship. But for example, when Iran sent ballistic missiles, one of the things that was censored was the location of the hits.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you can see why, because you don't want to give them additional information about
how good their aim is and how to correct it.
Right, exactly. So that makes sense. And what you're saying is that Ronen Bergman, who is an Israeli citizen, writes for the New York Times and for Israeli publications. He doesn't have the same standard that he has to follow when he writes for the New York Times?
I think that this is a gray area, that if you do something abroad, it can't be prosecuted in Israel.
Because he doesn't have a GPO card, is what you're saying. He's like, he doesn't follow those.
I don't know the details.
Because he's not a foreign correspondent. But
at least he exposes outrageous things. One of the things I showed on my podcast is a piece from Dan Sinor's podcast with him, Call Me Back. It's actually a good podcast. Mm-hmm. And Bergman says that someone in intelligence gave him a rundown of the whole 10 plagues of Egypt that we were going to rain down on Hezbollah. And he said, that guy said, I'll send it to you in WhatsApp so you can check when it's done. And he said, and lo and behold, it was exactly done like that. And then you think, this guy's walking around with the whole plan of Israel's attack on Hezbollah in his WhatsApp. And he is a correspondent for secret services. And so I imagine some secret services are trying to invade his WhatsApp. And then he brags about it somewhere. So it's just mind-boggling that nobody does anything. But here, Pamela, you have to understand, the deep state in Israel is very well synchronized. And they go after Ari Rosenfeld. Who is Ari Rosenfeld? This is a guy who worked in the intelligence. And then there was a piece of information that he thought the prime minister should see. So he went to his commander and said, why don't we pass this on to the prime minister's office? And he said, no, we won't. And Ari was furious, and he passed it on to someone in the prime minister's office. Now, that piece of information was actually useful to Israel, but it was not useful to the left, because it said that the demonstrations every Saturday are actually encouraging Hamas to persevere, and they are causing immense damage. And they show their plan, how to use the psychology of the hostage families in order to apply pressure on the government, which the left here was just serving. They were just serving the propaganda of Hamas. So it was very inconvenient to the left. And so the very leftist head of Shin Bet, the rogue head of Shin Bet, Ronen Bar, took Ali Rosenfeld, put him in jail, not letting him see a lawyer for 10 days, and they interrogated him like crazy. While whoever it was that leaked to Bergman the whole plan of the war was never interrogated. And so you probably know about the case of the military advocate general who leaked the fake rape.
I know, but let's tell people for the podcast.
So one day, one bright day, it was 29th of July 2024, the military police comes in huge force and arrests 10 soldiers from what is known as Force 100. Force 100 is a unit that is tasked with the most horrendous job. They guard Sde Teiman, which is the detention facility for the Nukhba Hamas terrorists. So these are people who perpetrated October 7 and their ilk.
They're the very trained military wing.
Yes. And so these soldiers are also very well trained, but the facility is extremely complicated. They didn't expect such a huge influx of terrorists. So they didn't have cells. So they created these large cages for 80 people where the terrorists were laying on like yoga mats with handcuffed. But there could be 80 to 120 in each such cage. So the military police who guard the facility are not allowed in, and they don't have lethal weapons. They have bats, they have tasers, they have tear gas, they don't have lethal weapons. Outside the perimeter are soldiers with rifles who can take control if something extreme happens. Force 100 are the only ones who go in, and they go in batches of 10. Now, I wrote a big piece for Tablet on this, and I spoke to these people, and I know how dangerous their task is. They go in there without lethal weapons. So they have also bats, they have tasers, they have tear gas, and they have an attack dog, which is, by the way, what do you call it? Muzzled. And he told me, this guy from Force 100, he said, if all the 80 or 100 terrorists inside say 1, 2, 3 and all rush at us, there's nothing we can do. We don't have lethal weapons and we can't do anything. So we need to create awe. And so we enter with a barking dog and with these big riot shields, and we are shouting, and it's very tense. And so on this particular evening in question, for which they were arrested, 4 detainees arrived from another jail, and they had to be searched. So Force 100 goes into the cage and puts the shields up, as they always do, and searches these 4 new arrivals. One of them is resisting search very wildly, trying to bite one of them, kicking and screaming and calling on the other prisoners to attack them. And so they use force. Later that evening...
And this is all on video.
This is all on video. There's also security cams all around. But you don't see what's happening behind the shields. So
behind the shields that they're holding?
Behind the shields that they're holding is where they conduct the search, because you don't want to conduct a search in full view of all the prisoners. So you want to isolate them. So that's what they do. And then it was alleged that they raped the detainee.
Who made that allegation?
This is a very strange story. The IDF made that allegation against them, and based on almost nothing at all. I'm saying this, I can put my credit behind it.
Who at the IDF?
Well, the military police and the Office of the Advocate General, who is also the head of the Army prosecution. So we know this because on the set, when they were there to extend their detention, they were blamed for sodomy, with apparently sodomy using a bat, which there was no evidence to. We know now from the medical evidence that, I'm sorry to get you inside the intestines of a terrorist, but the anus was not hurt. And so the doctors concur that any forced entry would cause damage to the anus. Apparently he was hiding something in his rectum, which he tried to take out that night, and it might have been some sharp tool, because the only laceration that he had was, I'm sorry, Pamela, 4 centimeters up. So they had the medical reports. They could have known this. But
they, meaning the IDF.
The IDF. Now, the terrorists did not complain of rape. You had a rape accusation without a rape complaint. In any attack less severe than murder, you need the victim to complain. So he didn't.
Back up for a minute. What was the genesis of the complaint if the alleged victim didn't complain?
That is exactly the question that I tried to answer. Now, there are two different versions or two possibilities. One is that a doctor from Doctors
Without Borders.
No, there's Doctors for Human Rights. They're worse. They are a rabid anti-Zionist organization, and they've been trying to blame the IDF for sexual crimes since the beginning of the war, since November. And why sexual crimes? Because there's a Lie Act, I think, in the United States, where if your ally is suspected of sexual crimes, you are entitled to stop cooperation with them and stop their military aid to them. So it's a quick snap operation. You don't have to prove sexual crimes, just that there are allegations that seem plausible. That's enough. So they've been trying to do that. Now, one of these doctors, the idiots in Sde Teiman, employed in Sde Teiman. And so after they were arrested, he bragged to Haaretz and to Channel 11 that it was his report that led to the arrest of the soldiers. Apparently, there's no corroborating evidence to that version, although it makes sense.
There must be evidence, but you're saying that nobody is saying who the doctor was who wrote that report.
We don't know that the report triggered the arrest.
Ah, I see. But you do know that he wrote a report that said that?
We know that he says that he did.
Okay.
Now, the other option is even stranger. On the 18th of July, it all happened on the 5th of July. Like the 29th of July is the arrest. So you have July is your frame of time. So on the 5th of July, the prisoner arrived and was searched. He was then, after complaining of headaches, going to the toilet, coming back and suddenly bleeding from his anus, he was evacuated to a hospital, where also a doctor saw him and says there were no signs on his anus. So they had that information. But then military police interviewed him. He didn't complain of rape. They didn't ask him about it. And then there was a conversation with Shin Bet. Apparently, 2 conversations with Shin Bet. And Shin Bet only confessed one of them. It denied the other, although we know they were lying.
Okay, wait. We're going to back up. First of all, tell people who Shin Bet is.
Shin Bet is the General Security Service, which is the counter-terrorist arm of the FBI, is the Shin Bet.
Also known as Shabak.
Shabak. It's just Americans know Shin Bet from the days of Ben Gurion.
And when you say 2 conversations, one of which...
So here's the strange thing. One of which they denied. They came to see him on the 18th and on the 21st of July. So we're somewhere around just past the middle of the time frame. And in one of them was denied, and we know they have been lying because their prison records show that he was in an interview with Shin Bet. So it's also a stupid lie because the prison registers everything. And in one of them, there's no stenography, there's no video recording, there's no audio recording, nothing, all of which should have been available. When you interrogate a prisoner, you have to record it. They spoke to him without recording. And in their report, which was a memo composed after the meeting, they said that he complained of an insertion of a sharp object into his anus, which is, by the way, when he did complain, he did not complain of a sharp object. When he did complain, he complained of a bat, and that was after the arrest. And if this is not weird enough, we have him on tape saying to the interrogators, if I complain, what do I get in return? So we have that.
That's the first interrogation, not Shin Bet.
No, that is after the arrest of the Force 100. The first time he mentioned the sexual crime was after they were arrested.
It is so convoluted.
So that is hearsay because they don't have him. They don't have a quote from him. There's a memo after the meeting which complains of something not exactly like that which has happened. And also they said that he complained about it happening 20 days previous. 20 days previous is before he came to Sde Teiman. So this whole memo is like, it's completely unreliable. And to top everything up, Now the actual terrorist was released in the prisoner exchange, and he's back in Gaza. So the same people who arrested Force 100 did not alert any other authority that this guy should not go back to Gaza.
And you're saying that because he wouldn't be able to testify, that's why you would want him to stay.
How are you going to conduct
Right.
the trial without him? But we started from the tape, right? How did the tape come about? Well, when they arrested, in my interpretation is they arrested them for show. They wanted to show how strict we are with our own soldiers of applying the law. They always say that in the army prosecution.
Right.
We are strict so that you don't get sued in The Hague, as if The Hague cares about how strict we are. They're just looking for excuses. So right after this showy arrest, which creates a huge scandal, legislators from the right came to protest in Sde Teiman, and a riot started, and they and a crowd broke into the camp. And that was
The camp where the terrorists were being held?
not inside the cells, but the out perimeter, in an attempt to free Force 100 soldiers, or so they said.
The soldiers were being held in the same place where the terrorists were being
No,
held?
it was on the day of the arrest. So this happens immediately after. On 29th of July, the soldiers are arrested. One of them says on social media, "Help us, we're being arrested for no reason." And so a riot erupts outside this Sde Teiman. I know it's very complicated.
It is so convoluted.
And they break into the perimeter of the compound of Sde Teiman. Eventually, the Advocate General of the Army, who is the head of the prosecution, releases a tape which is supposed to show that there was a rape, but they take him behind the shields and we don't see it.
When it first came out, we didn't know.
Right. It was leaked.
It was leaked.
And we didn't know who. And you're right, it's an important part of the story. I don't know if it's a whole saga.
It's so bonkers.
Yeah. Watch this interview later and see if it comes out clear enough. Because what happened is on July 29th, they are arrested. On August 6th, we suddenly see on Channel 12 this story that says that Israeli soldiers raped a detainee in Sde Teiman, and there's dramatic narration to it by Guy Peleg, which implanted memory in many people's heads.
Guy Peleg is who?
Guy Peleg is the correspondent for Channel 12.
Okay.
And here they take him behind the shields, probably because they're aware of the security cameras. And this planted memory in many people's heads, because having arguments with crazy foreigners on Twitter after I published a piece about this in Tablet, which was very detailed, they said, "These Zionist liars, I saw him rape him with my own eyes."
I saw the video.
And there's nothing on the video,
No.
but there's a pixelated center.
Yeah.
As if something is happening behind the pixels. There's nothing behind the pixels. How do we know? There is an indictment against the soldiers. There is no sexual crime in that indictment. There's just violence. So they were, in the end, they were not indicted for the thing for which they were arrested. And the man who was the alleged victim is in Gaza, and we can't verify anything. So it all looked like what? They were trying to frame the 100 Force 100 soldiers. Why would they do it? So here are several hypotheses. One is that these are the same people who wanted to stop the war,
The people who...
the same leftist circles in the army and outside it who wanted to stop the war, and so they were fishing for a sexual crime plausible enough to make the war stop. And it's not clear that the Advocate General in the army does not belong to the same circles, because she's friends with all the Kaplan demonstrators. So it's the same milieu.
Kaplan demonstrators are the leftist demonstrators who were demonstrating first, before the war, they were demonstrating against Netanyahu, against judicial reform.
And before that, against Corona regulations. So here in Israel, it was the left. They said, oh, Netanyahu is promoting a dictatorship by
locking
us down. And before that, they were demonstrating against Netanyahu serving under indictments. And so the excuses changed.
So this is the Saturday night protest group.
The Saturday night social event of the left on Kaplan Street. So that's one explanation, that she was part of a conspiracy to stop the war. And this is still an immature conspiracy theory. It does make sense, but that needs further verification. We don't have that yet. Another explanation, which I am more inclined to believe, is that Israel's elite, Israel's progressive elite, like America's, is defining its own identity in opposition to the deplorables. And Force 100 was branded as Kahanist, as radical rightist from the start, although it's probably a mixed bag, we don't know, but these are veteran soldiers, tough guys, and it's easy to brand them as, Bibists and Kahanists, and they represent the worst of us, allegedly.
Kahanis is people who follow someone who was a convicted terrorist Israeli.
He was the head of a party banned from the Israeli Knesset for racism.
Not terrorism.
No, racism.
Oh.
So he was an anti-Arab racist. His ideology was ethnic cleansing, and he was banned from running to parliament and later murdered in the United States. He's an American rabbi. So, in my opinion, they are inclined to believe the most terrible things about the IDF. And the softest interpretation is they thought it was possible, and they did want to protect the soldiers from being pursued in international courts. Because in these courts, if the legal system here operates strictly enough and enforces the law strictly enough, then there's no need for international intervention.
That's also by the rules of the international court.
Yeah.
That they can't intervene if there's a process happening inside the country, right?
Although, they care little about the rule, but when it comes to Israel. But this interpretation, I think, has fallen apart. Because, first of all, people noticed immediately that the video that made headlines all over the world and sparked the worst anti-Semitic storm of the whole war, the Ministry of the Diaspora conducted a survey which found out just how bad the influence of that tape was, and found out it was unbelievable. It was a wildfire all over the world. IDF are rapists, and now you don't need to be a Candace Owens to believe that. Now, when I wrote this piece for Tablet, David Samuels, the editor, told me, do you realize that everyone here knows that there was a rape? So if you're going to say that there wasn't, you're going to go uphill against people's beliefs.
When he said everyone here, he meant in the U.S., not a tablet.
No, he meant in the United States.
Yeah.
So the video was immediately after airing. Ayala Hassan, an investigative journalist on another channel, Channel 1, who has a reputation for being fair, said this tape is fake because it's comprised of two different sets of footages with different time steps.
I didn't know that.
One of them is before the prisoner arrived.
Really?
So why did you put them together, and who put them together? Secondly, there's this pixelated part which hides basically nothing. And so on the right, there was an immediate outcry saying, why aren't we investigating the leak? Ari Rosenfeld was held in custody for 3 months for the leak that helped Israel, and this leak, which caused this amazing damage, was never investigated, and the left was just silent, and Channel 12 was silent. So if you were watching Channel 12, it didn't apologize, nothing. They just stood behind their journalism. Imagine this, Pamela. Why is this investigative journalism? If something is already being investigated, you don't need to expose it on Channel 12 when it can cause unbelievable damage. Imagine what happened to the hostages when you publish internationally that we are raping Palestinians. Imagine what revenge they took on the hostages. Some of them now dead.
And at least 8 of the hostages have discussed some of the sexual assault that they experienced.
Some of it might have been exacerbated or even initiated by this story. So there was really no journalistic reason to publish this. You're not shedding light into the dark. You're not disinfecting something with sunshine. It's already been investigated.
So somebody decides to investigate this leak.
No.
Well, how did it come out then?
Nobody investigates this leak because when we scream that on right-wing outlets like my podcast consistently, like Channel 14, like all our Twitter accounts, the left and the deep state just ignore it because it's just the right. And it's all fake news.
Who would have been the person who should have investigated it? The Advocate General?
The Advocate General, the story is complicated. An organization called We Choose Life, an NGO of bereaved parents, submitted an appeal to the Supreme Court saying, we are demanding the investigation. First of all, the Minister of Security, or as you call it, Minister of Defense, demanded an investigation. The Advocate General said, don't worry, we're on it. And she lied.
So she is the one who is supposed to do the investigation.
The police can do the investigation. The Shabak can do the investigation.
So they're different entities.
And we should have, because you are a suspect. You can't investigate something in which you are a suspect.
But wait, how did they know she was a suspect?
Because where could the tape have come from? This is security camera footage from a detention center. The detention center is run by the military police. She is the head of the army prosecution. Technically, they're not the same hierarchy. In reality, they are. So it's either them or her. It's either her office or them, which is what we said on the right-wing outlets. But she said to the minister, yeah, we checked and we don't know because too many people have seen this. Some of them are not under an agreement for secrecy. How do you call it? DN something? There's a name for non-disclosure agreement. So she said, we can't find out. I was sorry, we tried, we can't find out. And we on the right said, how come you believe her? It's someone in her office, obviously, and she's investigating it. And so this organization called We Choose Life appealed to the Supreme Court against that sham investigation and said, she's in a conflict of interest. We want a real investigation. Enter the Attorney General of Israel, who is a major force against the government, Gali Ba'arav Miara. She is a permanent obstacle to anything the government is trying to do because she's also the legal counsel to the executive. Pamela, welcome to the labyrinth of our deep state. She is a main player. And when it was appealed to the court, she came to answer for the state. And she said to the state, first of all, I don't think any damage. There's no reason to make a fuss of this because no damage, no secrets were revealed, and therefore there was no damage to Israel's security, she said, implausibly to the court. And then she said, when there was a second discussion in the court, second court appearance, she said, we don't have the technological means to find out where the leak came from because there are too many people who had access to the... What do you mean? You can take the journalist's phone. You take journalist's phone on the right every day.
Do they do that here?
Yeah, absolutely. The editor of the Jerusalem Post had both his phones confiscated and searched. And so, of course, they do.
So we don't do that because we protect journalists' sources.
Well, here you protect journalist sources on the left, but not on the right. This is how this is run by the deep state, which is what we say, we now see everything. We know you're lying. Everybody knows you're lying, except if you watch Channel 12, then you don't. So she intervenes, and so the case seems to be closing. Yeah, there's no... But then something unexpected happened. The government manages to finally pull the rotten tooth called Ronen Bar, head of the Shin Bet, and place a normal, by the way, religious settler at the head of Shin Bet, which the whole deep state is rallying against, but the government this time would not budge. And apparently they made clear that there would be hell in that case. So they let David Zini in. And now what happens? The suspected advocate general in the army has a PR woman, and she wants her promoted. She wants her promoted to an army judge. So if you are promoted to an army judge, you have to go through a...
Oh, you have to take a lie detector test?
A lie detector test. And she goes to a lie detector test. And who administers lie detector tests inside the security apparatus? Shin Bet does. And so she goes to that test, and either she confessed before, as you're asked to do, before you go to a lie detector, before, so that it doesn't mess up the test. And then she spills the beans, and she said, the leak was authorized by the Army Advocate General.
Her?
Yeah. And so If Ronen Bar was still in office, this would go up to Ronen Bar, and he would have said, she failed the test, don't promote her. But it's not Ronen Bar anymore, it's Zini. And when that came to him, he said, oh, apparently we know who leaked the tape now because we have this testimony. And he passes it on to Eyal Zamir, who is the chief of staff.
Of the army.
Of the army. The attorney general calls the chief of staff and said, don't pass this information on to the minister. Why? She doesn't explain. However, for the first time in his life, because he's also a progressive, he defies her and he gives it to the minister. And why does he do that? Has he switched sides? No. Is he bent on finding out the truth? No. But he just knows that if he would, Zini would. So he would make a joke of himself. And this reaches the government. And then a firestorm erupts, after which the advocate general suddenly resigns and gives a letter to the press, which is probably the most outrageous piece of the whole story. She says, after the riot in Sde Teiman, after we arrested Force 100, there was a riot. And I felt that the law enforcement authorities under my command are being attacked. And so in order to clear them, I authorized leaking the tape. I made the same face. What do you mean? In order to pretend that they had good reason for arresting these soldiers, you threw the soldiers to the dogs, smeared them with a faked, cooked tape all over the world, hurt Israel, started an anti-Semitic firestorm in order to create the impression that your soldiers did the right thing, which we now know they did not. They certainly did not need to do that in such a showy way. Imagine how it could all have been different if there is a suspicion. And I'll finish with that.
What soldiers did the wrong thing?
The military police did the wrong thing for arresting them for a sexual crime.
For arresting them, right?
There never was.
Right, okay.
So she protected her law enforcement soldiers, which is an outrageous thing to even think reasonable to say. This is our own army. If you take a step back, this is the worst anti-Semitic smear of the war, and it was generated by our own army, by these progressives in our own army. And so this was her explanation of why she started this storm, and she stood behind it. She thought that she was making her case well when she put it in her resignation letter, which was published. And then the Attorney General of Israel did not arrest her. She had a whole day to continue destroying evidence. And then she made what seems like a fake suicide attempt. Suddenly she was missing. Her car was found near the beach. And 4 or 5 hours later, she was found and in a very articulate way explained that she was confused. Oh, and she lost her phone. She lost her phone in that, she doesn't remember where. And only then was she arrested for a few days, released to house arrest with no restrictions. And then the phone was suddenly found in the sea. You could open the opening screen and it had a picture of her. So that if you accidentally swam and found that iPhone, you just, oh, this is hers, I'll give it to the police. So nobody trusts this phone to be anything real. And the battery was half full. So Amit Segal, the journalist, and I don't remember if he made this crack exactly, but this could be a really good advertising for iPhone. Like a phone was inside salt water for a week. It only lost half its battery, and it's completely functional. Amazing.
Did they ever find the real phone?
We don't know, and there's no investigation, mind you.
There's still no investigation.
There's still no investigation because after the interventions by the Attorney General, and after the Supreme Court found that she lied to the Supreme Court or else submitted someone else's lies, but she's at least a witness, she insisted on the investigation being under her, the state prosecution. And they said, no, you're in a conflict of interest. Finally. So they authorized the Minister of Justice, whom they hate. He initiated the reform against them. They hate him. And they authorized him to appoint a special counsel, a special investigator. except they regained their senses after a while. They swallowed their insult and remembered that the Attorney General was one of their team. And so the two judges that he managed to find to be special investigators, they struck down. And so the investigation is now going on. And to top it off, I know this is...
Wait, back up. The investigation is now going on, but not with the judges.
Yeah, it went on. The police was supposed to conduct this, but the head of the special unit in the police for serious crimes was suddenly and inexplicably interrogated and removed from his post. And his deputy, who is still under the same apparatus, said that the Attorney General is not a suspect in the case and will not be investigated. So the deep state is now showing all the seams.
Okay, the Attorney General is not the Advocate General, right? So the Advocate General is the one who leaked it. The Attorney General seems to have protected the Advocate General. And the investigation is going on by whom?
By the police. It isolated. They understand they can't save her. So she has to be sacrificed, but they want to stop it.
The Advocate General.
The Advocate General of the Army who leaked the tape. By the way, she also lied to the Knesset committees. The Committee on Foreign Affairs and Security had her and asked her about the leaked tape before the scandal erupted, and she also lied to them, which in Israel is not as illegal as it is. It's frowned upon, but it's not a violation of the law, since the Knesset does not have oversight authority over the state apparatus.
Well, what a balagan.
It is, and in a way, I think this is a watershed, because they've managed to bury unbelievable crimes that they have committed, including using cyber weapons on our phones illegally.
What?
The police. 13,000 cases of their asking judges and mostly receiving permission to invade our phones while misleading the judges about the way or the tool they will use. And what they use is Pegasus. It's banned for use inside the country because it's a weapon. It's a cyber weapon that can just download your whole phone.
Oh, wow.
So they've used this to, allegedly, they used this in the Netanyahu investigations in order to extort, to shake down state witnesses. Or that's why we think.
Who's the they?
They is the police in this case.
The police put it on the phone.
Yeah.
And
this is going to sound to your audience like I've been taking acid.
I know. You sound like Candace Owens, I have to say.
Thank you.
The twists and turns and convolutions of this story about what Israelis are doing sounds very...
Sinister.
Yeah, it sounds very weird.
And so I want to challenge your listeners. Take me on any of these details. I've published a detailed piece. It's not up to speed because it was a while ago, but I published a detailed piece in Tablet magazine. I urge anyone who thinks anything there is not true to sue me. Please do. Everything is documented, and the story is as outrageous as it sounds. But what I'm saying is they've managed to bury many things, but this will be their downfall in the end, I believe. Because you've touched our soldiers. And now the press is rallying behind the Advocate General who smeared our soldiers with rape of a Palestinian detainee. Look, you can confuse Israelis, you can lie to them on the media, you can create a cloud of verbiage around the case invading the phones. But when you throw our soldiers to the dogs, we pay attention. And this rubs Israel the wrong way, and they don't yet understand how bad it is. Because Channel 12 has doubled down on its story, saying, well, they didn't commit rape, but still they abused the prisoner with violence, which I don't think is true either. But they stand behind it, and they keep saying it. And they stand behind Guy Peleg, who broke the story. And their rating is just sinking, because this is a litmus test. People who have been believing them for a long time say, that makes no sense. There was no good reason to publish this story and cause this terrible damage to the soldiers. Now, after I published the story, I met the actual soldiers by accident in some rally. The commander of the unit who conducted the search and who is accused came to me and said, you guys on the right-wing media, you don't know how important it is for us that you keep talking about this, because our lives have been ruined. Our reputations were ruined. He said, I'm on house arrest. I need someone to supervise me, and that's my wife, so we both can't work. We went bankrupt because of this lie, and they've ruined our lives. And I told him, don't worry, I am on this case permanently. And I've been doing it on my podcast. I think my podcast, apart from Ayala Hassan on Channel 11, my podcast was the most detailed source on the alleged rape in Sde Teiman. And I keep doing it. And once in a while, we follow up on this, check where things are. I just recently had their lawyer on my podcast.
The accused lawyer.
The lawyer of the accused. And we are not going to let go of this.
When you say the right-wing media, how much media in Israel is right-wing?
Now a lot, but there is an effective wall between left and right. First of all, leftist politicians are threatening to close down our media because they say that's not news, it's propaganda. You know, the left always blames you for what they plan to do. Or as Batya Unger Sargon once said, a leftist accusation is actually a confession. They're telling you what they plan to do. So they say, we are inciting. So Channel 14, who has been reporting the truth about Sde Teiman all this time, that should be closed because that's propaganda. And their leftist propaganda is news. So Channel 14 is rising, the right-wing channel. Channel 12 is sinking. There's a great rise in social media. My podcast, by the way, the leading conservative podcast in Israel, and the second ranking generally on politics, has become a podcast channel. I now have 5 different programs with other podcasters, and we're doing really well, and people are listening. And we have Twitter, and we have other social media, although more restricted. And so they've lost their monopoly. One prominent journalist who helped bury the story that Arafat, when the Oslo Accords broke, peace accords between the Palestinians and the Israelis, Arafat said in Arabic, don't worry, it's just a trick, basically. And Yediot Achronot, Israel's leading daily, refused to publish.
They knew.
Because a former advisor on terrorism to the prime minister came to Nahum Barnea, he's the Tom Friedman of Yediot Achronot, came to him with the tape. And he said, I'm not going to publish this. Apparently, according to the former advisor, he said, there's no such thing as truth. Every story promotes an agenda, and yours promotes the agenda of the enemies of peace. Now, Nahum Barnea is denying that he said that, but he's not denying that he did not publish the story. And now there was a bill, it didn't go through. There was a bill for censorship on social media. And Nahum Barnea was in favor of that bill, of course. And this is a gem for you, Pamela. If you deal with freedom of speech. He said, this law is necessary because truth has lost its monopoly in the age of social media. And I wrote a piece saying, no, my friend, your ability to lie has lost its monopoly in the age of social media, and you're gone. And if they think they will bury this Sde Teiman affair, they are mistaken. It will not happen.
That quote sounds an awful lot like the quote that he denied having said.
Yeah, it does.
Does it not?
It does.
Say that again, what it was.
But he wrote this. He actually wrote this. He said, we need to promote this law because in the age of social media, truth has lost its monopoly.
Okay, now say the thing that he denied having said about Arafat.
He denies saying that there is no such thing as truth, which is a postmodern view.
Right.
That there are only agendas.
That's right. That sounds very similar. When you say truth has lost its monopoly, it's like saying there is no truth.
Because it's the same mentality. It's the Ministry of Truth. The Ministry of Truth does not believe that there is truth, right? This is Orwell. It doesn't believe. It believes truth is what the party tells you to believe. The Soviet encyclopedia kept changing. You know, once Trotsky was murdered, you had to take out the page of Trotsky and put in something on, what's the name of this flower? Orchids. There was an entry on orchids that I think they had to insert where Trotsky was missing. So they operate in a way that they tell you, they convince you that there's no such thing as truth. The most telling scene in 1984, in Orwell's brilliant novel, is when O'Brien interrogates Smith, the protagonist of the novel. And he said, how much is 2 and 2? And Smith says 4. And it gives him an electric shock. Said, no, the party says it's 5. And so they go on. And finally, Smith says, he said, how much is 2 and 2? He says, 5. He gets another shock. And he says to O'Brien, why? I said what you wanted. He said, you don't believe it yet.
Right. So in this environment, you have Ronen Bergman suing you.
First of all, I'm not financially in danger because people on the right are getting it. Everybody's sued now. All the Brothers in Arms, all the Kaplan, all the NGOs on the left and the left-wing politicians are suing right and left. I mean, right. They're suing everybody in order to silence us. They think, and again, they're miscalculating because these are the elites. And what we see as a public is the rich people are trying to put a gag on the less rich people. And the courts are cooperating, by the way. They suddenly give huge fines. But what it also generated is when I was sued, I opened a crowdfunding account and I've got enough money to finance my legal battle. And here's the thing that Ronen Bergman doesn't understand. Maybe he'll watch and understand now. This is good for me. When I want to explain what my podcast is doing, my viewers get it in one click. Oh, here is our way to fight the Ministry of Truth. And so the very fact that Bergman is suing me is actually very good for my podcast.
Well, congratulations, Gadi.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for talking to me for so long.
If you want to get sued too, I can perhaps arrange it.
I would rather avoid that. Thank you very much. But I'm very happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.